We are back with episode 74 of Go FUD Yourself. JD Gagnon here, and my good friend Kiara, you're back today. What's up?
I am back. We're going to talk so much about the crypto arms race today. I'm actually thrilled because I think I could fill 3 hours with everything that's going on crypto arms race wise. But if we do run out of crypto arms race time, we're going to talk about the EU, we're going to talk about Japan, we're going to talk about Russia, we're going to talk about Nigeria, we're talking about just Asia in general. There's a lot going on crypto arms race wise. But if we get bored of that, if JD moves beyond from that topic, we'll also have some degen news about Ledger, Solana, and Bitcoin whales.
So what you're saying is, if I'm boring enough, you'll move on.
No, I think vice versa this time.
Oh, if you're boring enough, I'll move on. All right. We got no merch today, just wearing some hearts. I have 3 kids, and they've all decided that these 3 hearts on my shirt represent them. So yeah, today I'm repping the kids. And with that, let's go. Oh, the music stopped mid-dance. I'm just trying to get on Twitter here.
Yeah, get it together.
I know. All right, we're cooking with fire. We are now on Spaces, and we're everywhere else. Amazing. Did you have a good weekend?
Literally everywhere else. It's Tuesday, so who knows now?
Oh, yeah. Wasn't yesterday a holiday? Oh, no, it was a holiday here, not there.
Yeah, not here.
That's
why there's so much news also.
I love how there's like all these months now, like, Black History Month, Pride Month, and we have Memorial Day.
Doesn't the US have a bunch of Memorial Days?
Now they have Veterans Day, I think, and then Memorial Day.
Yeah. Okay. I thought there were 3.
It's like Remembrance Day in Canada.
Yeah. Last year I was in DC for Memorial Day after the Government Blockchain Association conference, and I got to
weekend this year.
I got to see some of the super cool things, like all the parades, and there was a huge contingent of Canadian motorcycle riders who ride down for the parade because they fought alongside American veterans. Yeah, it was super interesting to just walk around and see all the Memorial Day stuff.
I guess my point is either reduce all the other crap to one day, or let's expand veterans.
Well, see, the other stuff at this point only exists for capitalism, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that the typical trans person is thrilled that Ford put out a gay truck, right? I don't think I don't think we can blame people who are queer
It's
identified.
all virtue signaling.
Right?
I don't want to spend a whole bunch of our show talking about social issues.
Then why did you bring it up?
Because
I'm extra sensitive because our election was yesterday. So
yeah, go UCP. Let's not talk about that either. But
I don't hate the UCP, but I do hate Danielle.
Yeah, she's not my favorite, but it's better than NDP. So we're good. But anyways, okay. So the reason that I'm weird about Veterans Day is because honestly, I can't even talk about it without all my hair sticking up on my body, because I've never served, but I have an insane amount of respect for people that do. I'm truthfully too scared. I was too scared to consider the military when I was that military age. And so I think it's an absolute shame how we treat veterans in North America.
Absolutely.
I think it's unfreaking believable that so many of them are homeless. So many of them can't get medical support. So someday when I'm done building startups, the reason I bring this up is because I will transition almost entirely to veteran support somehow.
Does that mean that you're almost done building startup?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was is this a weird signal that I should be?
No, I need to have enough meaningful cash in the bank so that I can actually do something, have an impact with veterans. So
I believe that our other founder, Alex, also has a social imperative for when he's done with startups.
He has a social one. I'm not sure if it's the same with veterans. I'm just weird about the veteran thing. I don't have any family that served. I don't really have any personal reasons. It's just, I think it's insane that we take it for granted. Anyways, okay. Arms race. Let's move on.
It's a bad transition into like not a real war, you know?
Boom. Well, yeah, it's a good transition. Hey, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, EU.
We're going to talk about the EU just like a little bit vaguely. There's actually a few different articles about the EU that came out. One that is super noticeable is that they are tracking your wallet information. I don't think that this is something new that we didn't anticipate, right? But they're looking to regulate crypto wallets. This is obviously kind of the next step with MiCA. That being, some people are pretty funny about it. On the other hand, people are thrilled that at least the EU is being upfront instead of taking just enforcement action like America.
Yeah, I think so. This is they're already tracking wallets.
Yes.
Like, let's be real. All they're doing now is regulating it so that instead of them chasing their tail trying to confirm who owns a wallet, they're going to regulate wallet providers so that there has to be some version of KYC for all users, and that'll be reported the same way that, again, if it's managed the same way that the banking system is managed, the government has access to your accounts. The revenue agency in America and everywhere else has access to your bank accounts. Mm-hmm. And there's a reporting obligation for certain transaction sizes. MiCA is suggesting money transmission P2P of 3,000 or more.
I should talk about that more later, but
has to be reported. So anyways, this to me is a nothing burger. This is just people looking for reasons to kick and scream.
Yep.
We've been saying this forever. Like, regulation is not going to be amazing. Like, we're not going to be like, ha, this regulation made my life orders of magnitude better. Because on the surface, it's not going to feel that way. In the long run, it will be that way. We will be better as a space, and we will be much more protected as a population if regulation is implemented correctly. And so
the other element here about implementing correctly is that people are super fuddy about the digital euro. The digital euro is basically being prototyped right now in terms of a design component. Yeah. So this is also not news. I feel like this is still also a nothing burger. It's nothing new that we didn't know was coming. But what I do think is interesting is that I haven't been able to find an accurate date about it. So the digital euro has been in discussion and published on the EU Commission website since 2022, December 2022. So not that long ago. And they are moving quite quickly if they're already in design and prototyping.
Yeah, I mean, Circle just launched, not just, they launched into Avalanche last week, EuroC, which is their stablecoin. Yep. And which is really cool. I think that offers a whole new paradigm of payment infrastructure and Forex, 24-hour Forex, if you want. That's the largest Forex market in the world, is euro to USD. And you can simulate that with USDC and now EuroC. There's a whole bunch of other really cool things. Anyways, the reason I'm bringing this up is we were talking yesterday, I think, Lindsay and I, about CBDCs versus just their national currency stablecoin. And I think the latter is a lot better of a solution for the space long term. Just having, Brazilian real stablecoin and Turkish lira stablecoin, both of which exist. But anyways, we should continue to have those, and they should be managed by third parties like Circle or others, obviously, that can keep consumer protection and privacy at the forefront. Obviously, they'll have to report certain things to the government if required by law or subpoena. But it's not a free-for-all of surveillance state. That the CBDCs, in my opinion, has nothing to do actually with crypto and blockchain in terms of it bettering the space. It has everything to do with oversight and control. That's it. That's the only.
That's exactly what I was talking with Lindsay about yesterday, actually, before the stream, or maybe Sunday night. Is yes, having just a fiat token, a stable coin, is going to be way better for us as crypto users. But I don't think that countries will ever allow that to happen, because then they don't have the power and control over the currency.
Well, they still kind of do. I mean, they still have monetary policy control, because the value of the US dollar stablecoin is still pegged to the value of US dollar relative to other
but they're
currencies.
giving up all the potential they have for tracking and control and
of course.
Like they don't want to give that up.
Of course not. No, it's a giant power grab. That's the last 3 or 4 years has been that way in every front. It's let's create so much fear that people will do anything. Let's force people to stay at home. Let's force people. I still see people, honestly, like my age, healthy, that are walking around wearing masks and rubber gloves outside in Florida. Like,
let them do whatever they want, man.
They can do whatever they want. My point is that fear and the way that it's been perpetrated over the last 4, 5, 6 years, everybody acting like zombies. Like they're not even thinking critically anymore. They're just taking whatever the media says and just assuming it's truth and
Absolutely.
fact. And it's absolutely freaking nuts. But I mean, this is just another one of those steps in that direction. God
I mean,
forbid.
you and I can get into that about politics too for days, because we agree but are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. So it's kind of a fascinating conversation to have. On CBDCs, before we move on from CBDCs, Japan is pushing forward their digital yen. They have completed their proof of concept phase. They actually did some pretty interesting things. They assumed things like 100,000 people would be using 5 different exchanges, and they ran through a number of false transactions, that kind of thing, to see how it would go, and then looked at how they might scale it up. And it's just interesting to note that they are planning to make a decision about whether they'll move forward with the CBDC or not by 2026. So this is interesting to me because we have the digital euro that doesn't really have a timeline on it, but is moving really quickly. And meanwhile, we have the Bank of Japan, who's actively engaging with crypto users, actively trialing different elements out, trying to decide what the best use case scenario is going to be. Once they have a successful proof of concept, are moving into the next elements of small pilot phasing. And then they'll decide, like they're doing all of this work without any guarantee that they're actually going to continue with the CBDC.
I don't mind that they're taking their time. I think that's a prudent approach to this. I don't see any country that is going to not want a CBDC if they think they can get away with it, because it makes life a lot easier and a lot less expensive for them. And they have essentially absolute control and oversight over how citizens spend money, which even the most conservative of governments will still jump at that, I think, at that opportunity. And so it's not necessarily if, but rather when, in my opinion, unless there's enough public pushback in major countries or jurisdictions, the EU, America, Canada, on these CBDCs. We're seeing a decent amount of public pushback in America for the same reasons that I'm saying. Like even at the presidential candidate level, there's multiple candidates from the Republicans and Democratic leaning side that are saying CBDCs might not be good for a whole host of reasons. So something to think about.
So Japan, before we move on from Japan, is also the first one to enter. I mean, everybody agreed, but they're the first one to actually start enacting the FATF travel rule, which is where you can only exchange the $3,000 worth of crypto in a day internationally, right? What's interesting about this is that it's a Japanese exchange. They've been supported by the Japanese government to ensure that they have the resources to do this. It's called Bitflyer. What's really interesting about that is Bitflyer, not too long ago, was fined in New York State for not adhering to some of the data privacy elements. So this is interesting that they have selected Bitflyer to do this first. I think it's a good move on Bitflyer's part to say, hey, look, we are actually trying to be stringent now. And Japan, based on their societal context, it makes a lot of sense that they're the first ones to adhere to the new rule.
I agree. I don't really have any crazy
it's just good to know.
crazy thoughts on this one. This is more just like information pass along. I think anti-money law, like I've been saying this for years, like KYC and AML is like going to be non-negotiable everywhere. Like that's just a fundamental function of a financial system, is to know who your counterparty is and to make sure there's no money laundering being facilitated to the best of our ability. Now, we talked about this a few episodes ago. I mean, there's always going to be illicit activity with crypto, with fiat, with whatever. But we need to minimize that via making it insanely difficult for people that aren't willing to KYC and go through AML screening to have any options. And that's what's going to happen. So, I mean, this is great. It's good to see that companies are getting on board with this. Again, we see a lot of kicking and screaming from the vocal minority, I believe. It's my personal opinion in crypto.
Only yours.
Only mine. I see a lot of kicking and screaming from people that are super focused on, anonymity, pseudo-anonymity, privacy. I get it, but we need to start changing our approach to this as a space. Like, I understand the reluctance, but there's no way around it. It's happening. So let's just get on board, find ways around it. Stop thinking that it's going to ruin the space. It's not. Anyways.
That's actually interesting. I've seen less of that argument lately, but I also wonder if it's because the people who are vocalizing that are more anonymous, and so people don't take them as seriously. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. Generally speaking, the only people that are annoyed with it are pseudo-anonymous. Like, I mean, any of us that are public, I mean, I have to. It's a no-brainer. Like, you KYC to get Amazon delivered to your house. Like,
exactly.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just unbelievable that this is even a debate right now. But anyway.
So next up is Russia. This one is super interesting because Russia was basically looking to have a national exchange, and they have backpedaled severely. I would say this is probably the right thing to do, but some of the reasons that they want to do it aren't reasons we would necessarily agree with. Now, there's kind of two different elements here about. Obviously, they wanted to have a national crypto exchange for power and control. This is not surprising. This isn't something that we weren't sure about. But when they announced that they were doing this, the crypto community in Russia became very vocal about it. That's one group that probably does prefer to stay pseudo-anonymous based on, living in Russia. But they have decided not to pursue the national exchange, which obviously people in Russia are super thrilled about. But the reasons that they are looking at doing that is they want to foster other crypto exchanges being able to work in Russia so that they can do things like bypass sanctions or tornado the funds or that sort of thing. So it is a little bit controversial in that way. And then the other response that they had in terms of the actual crypto citizens is, this is a direct quote, is that a VPN makes other crypto platforms just a short click away. So we're not actually going to be reliably competing with those if people are living in fear of participating in our national exchange. Ergo, why bother building it?
I think they found out very quickly that people just aren't going to accept that, like, authoritarian control, even in Russia. I think it's a smart move. I don't think it changes much. Russia still has the ability, and there's a reason that many major exchanges don't actively operate in Russia, and that's because they have the power to essentially do whatever they decide. Like, they could just say, hey, you're breaking some rule, you owe us $50 million or $100 million or some nonsense. Like, it's unbelievable what some of these governments can do. Whether you are pro-Russia or anti-Russia, doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's an autocratic state currently. And for that reason, I think anytime that something is nationalized, it's a problem. So I think this is okay, but I also don't think that that it's going to change much. Their capacity to censor transactions and to do things to confiscate assets, I believe, will still exist. We'll see. I mean, step in the right direction, I guess. And that's again probably a result of the population pushing back, which I think is the only option we have, right? Is to speak with our wallets and to speak publicly about our opposition to things.
Scary to do in Russia, though. Like, if you actually read the articles about it, they're already saying that people didn't want to participate in national crypto exchange because if you buy a flight, then when they don't want you to be traveling for some reason, whether that's related to work or draft dodging or anything else, you can expect to not be sending funds to dissidents. And like, who defines dissident? The Russian government does in this case. And, it's probably a pretty broad definition. So
don't love it.
Get ready to set your decks up in Russia. I don't know. Before we move on from Eurasia, I just want to say that we have this really great article that will be linked on our Twitter that kind of outlines what the different places and what everyone in Asia is doing right now. So we've already talked about Japan. I believe that last week we talked about China banning crypto mining. Do you remember that?
Well, we talked about crypto mining ban, but now Hong Kong is issuing licenses. So that's interesting. Go ahead.
No, I'm just wrapping up. So if you have any more stuff. South Korea, we talked about a couple times last week too.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the common theme here globally, aside from maybe in the US. Everybody's trying to figure this out. They're figuring in Europe that they're attracting a lot of business from the US, both consumers and entrepreneurs, because whether you like it or not, at least you know the rules. And so I think Asia is trying to do the same thing. Africa is trying to do the same thing. Everybody's trying to claim some land here, except for the U.S. for some reason. But hopefully
for reasons we don't understand. Yesterday, you and Lindsay talked about the Philippines and Citibank, didn't you?
No, we didn't. Oh. No, I don't think so. We didn't get to it.
Well, that is also a thing that's going on in Asia, so check that out. Asia, because it's so many countries with so many different cultural contexts, I witnessed that they are trying a variety of things, and Western countries could really learn from the lessons that Asia is setting up for us. So we will link that article. I think it's just a Cointelegraph article on Twitter. I'd suggest checking it out because it's kind of cool.
Speaking now we get Asia, wait.
Yeah.
Speaking of Asia, let's move on. Let's move on to the Bitcoin whales.
Oh, you want to talk about Bitcoin whales? Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. You tell me.
I like this one. So, I mean, this is something that happened. This ebbs and flows, generally speaking, anyways. So generally speaking, whenever people are holding, they move assets to cold storage or to a hardware wallet somewhere off an exchange so that it can sit securely and you're not worried about hacks or any of that crap. After Mt. Gox and Quadriga, and there's that's always kind of been a thing. But then recently, a lot of whales were holding Bitcoin and other core blue chip assets at major exchanges: FTX, Gemini, Celsius, et cetera, Binance, whatever. And many of them went bankrupt. And those deposits were all lost entirely because of fraud and misappropriation and many other things. So there's kind of two reasons for this. One, an argument could be made that we're probably comfortably at or past the bottom of the market. I don't know that with certainty, but that's usually a sign when you see that people are moving their assets off exchanges, generally speaking, and buckling up for a holding period. When there's a big inflow into exchanges of these major assets, that's the opposite. That's generally where people are going to use market makers to slowly sell their holdings and whatever. The other major reason here, I think, is just concern over privacy and fraud and misappropriation and all of these things. This is pretty important. I think this is a major inflection point in some ways, although I don't want to assume all the responsibility for this is on the fraud and all of that stuff. But I think, we needed some version of an inflection point to make it, because it's really easy to do centralized. It's not easy, but it's a hell of a lot easier to do these centralized platforms because they have a lot of control and they can, make things really cost effective for them, not necessarily for the user. And you can make the user experience like super seamless, super quick, which is why they grew so quickly. But I think now we're realizing the drawbacks in those highly centralized, offshore, quasi-unregulated institutions. And I think short of Coinbase and Kraken probably, and maybe Gemini, there's not really any others that are meaningfully safe that I would consider meaningfully safe. I'm sure there are others that are safe. I just wouldn't consider them that way. So anyways, this is important though, because I think this is shifting the focus. Even like most of these large holders are either institutions or guys that were super early that now have big asset bases. And if they're willing to find ways to live on chain and avoid centralized exchanges, the rest of us should too. That means that the space is getting better and better in terms of security and, confidence in key management and custody and all of these other things, self-custody. I think it's very important.
Do you want to wrap up with self-custody and ledger, or are you happy to end on major Bitcoin whales?
Well, I've got 2 minutes left. We can move to the ledger thing. I think this is funny.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I think obviously one of the old co-founders came out. We talked about this a while ago, and said that you've always been able to export, seeds, which I think is kind of interesting because we've all just kind of blindly trusted Ledger for years.
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is like that big of a deal. It's very edge casey in terms of where this would suck, but there's definitely a path to it sucking. if that makes sense. But I saw a thing the other day that said Trezor sales skyrocket 1,000%. And I'm like, no shit, because people are still buying hardware wallets. There's some FUD around Ledger at the moment. So we'll see. We'll see.
I thought it was interesting that they're doing an open source roadmap.
Yeah.
So is the idea there that you would be able to alter the code of your ledger to make it safer for you? What's the intention here?
Well, I mean, the idea with open sourcing code in a lot of ways is you still have a moat, generally speaking, at a certain point. And I think arguably Ledger has a pretty solid moat at the moment. And so anyways, I think this open sourcing it now just allows people to build on top of it, to assess its security from many, many angles. It allows white hats to expose vulnerabilities and so on.
I found some criticism that they're not open sourcing their firmware, which is where all of the debacle comes from anyway. So I don't know, maybe it's a bit of virtue signaling itself, right?
We'll see. I mean, I think there's a lot of firms that are working towards open sourcing. Like, I mean, you look at Twitter open sourced the algo, which to most other social media companies seems insane, probably. But I mean, even if you
now we can use it more effectively, right?
Well, that, and you know the rules, right? Like regardless of whether you like them or not, at least you know them. I've been saying this forever in many different contexts, but this is no different. So anyways, we'll have to see. I'm a big fan of open sourcing. We also have technologies that aren't open sourced because we may not have a moat yet and network effects. But eventually, I think many scaled technologies will become open sourced, and I'm a huge supporter. Anyways, all right, same place, same time, Monday to Friday, 12:30. Like, share, subscribe. Bookmark us on Twitter. If you're watching the replay, go to the 3 dots in the top right of the replay, and then say bookmark. Do all that shit. Help us spread the love. Kiara, go FUD yourself.
Go FUD yourself.